taking a look at statewide policy. It's a polarizing topic, New York's gun laws. Do you agree with the state of New York's recently established gun laws? Why or why not? Mr. Hassel, we are going to start with you on this. You have 1 minute to respond.
What gun laws are you
referring to?
It was passed by the legislature and the governor signed it, which basically means you have to do 16 hours of training, you have to do a lot of other things.
I favor things that will prevent Uvalde. And so I generally take, my position is that it's not up to the city to judge those matters or to deal with them, but it is up to the state and the federal government, and they ought to do something about it. I think that we should have common sense laws that will require people to register their guns, keep them locked up when they're not in use, and we should red flag people who are a threat.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hassel. Mary Mandel, do you support New York's gun laws? Why or why not? You have 1 minute.
Not the ones that were just enacted. I mean, you can't carry a weapon now into certain areas, which basically leaves it wide open for bad guys. You think if a bad guy is going to go into a mall and say, geez, I can't carry my weapon? Wrong answer. The bottom line is before these laws were enacted, New York State already had the toughest gun laws on the book. I never known once for a gun to sit on a table and fire itself. The problem goes back to the individuals that have the weapon. People, you know, I believe in background checks. People with mental health problems should not have that. It comes back to family members and friends. If they see someone that has a weapon that's illegal, they need to turn it into the police. Or if they have it legally and they're not acting in a manner that is conducive to owning a firearm, they need to also bring that to the authorities so that it can be looked at. I support the Second Amendment full-heartedly. And again, it's not the guns that are doing the killing, it's the people. If they're not using guns, then they'll use knives, cars, or whatever else they can get their hands on.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hassel, you have 30 seconds to respond.
My position I've just stated. I will say, however, that to say that guns aren't doing the killing, that it's people, well, or it's people that are doing the killing is exactly right. It's people, but the guns are doing the killing. I mean, let's face it. So what do you do about that? I don't have a solution for that right now. I just say that we need to look at ways to try to prevent guns getting into the hands of the wrong people, and we need to, yes, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And staying on the topic of guns, some are concerned with the number of gunshot reports and gun violence in the city. What would you do about the amount of guns in the city and gun violence? Mayor Mandel, we're going to start with you. You have 1 minute.
Well, we've already started a lot of that. Of course, some of the gunshots that come over as reported as gunshots aren't necessarily gunshots. They're firecrackers or misreported. What we did do is we did install a flock camera system that's supposed to help with identifying those individuals that may be involved with a gun shooting crime. Those flock cameras work on what they call a hot list to identify problem vehicles. They are license plate readers. So that's one thing we've done. We gather intelligence on individuals through different sources. I'm not going to get into the details, through our Detective Bureau and other resources with our other law enforcement partners to help keep the city safe. The bottom line is gun violence, again, starts at home. A lot of our gun violence is involving people that are teenagers. What is a teenager doing with a gun? Where are the parents? So we do everything we can to, stop gun violence, and we will continue to do that to make this city safe.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Hassel, same question goes to you. What would you do about gun violence in Elmira? You have 1 second to respond.
I think we need to keep the guns out of the hands of the wrong people. If young kids are getting the guns and using them, then we need to make sure that they don't get them. And if that means making parents of non-adult children responsible in some way or other, then that's what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Mandel, if you would like to respond, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, the bottom line is bad guys get guns. We got to try to do everything we can, and it comes back to people making sure that their guns are locked up, and store owners that own gun shops make sure those are locked up so they don't get stolen. And a lot of those guns are not coming in from the New York State. They're actually coming in from other states. But anyways, we will continue to do everything we can to keep our citizens safe from gun violence. public safety is one of my first priorities of the citizens of the city of Elmira.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.